Good Will Hunting is a film I've heard a lot about over the years. For one reason or another though, I just never got around to watching it myself. I'd occasionally see clips online or stumble across a discussion about the film, but still never gave it the time of day. In the comments of my last few videos though, I've gotten a few different suggestions, and for whatever reason, Good Will Hunting caught my attention more than any other. And I'm glad I finally took the opportunity to take a look at this masterpiece. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself though. To fully understand the fascination both I and many others have toward this film, we first gotta take a look into the long and complicated story behind its development. The script was originally written by Matt Damon, with him eventually enlisting the help of Ben Affleck. The two finished the script in 1994, but that version of the story was almost entirely different from what would eventually be put in production. Their story was allegedly a thriller about an intelligent young man in South Boston being targeted by the government for recruitment. The script was eventually sold to Castle Rock Entertainment, and due to the nature of the deal, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon retained the sole writing credit. Because of this, it's a little hard to tell how much influence others had over the story. For instance, Castle Rock Entertainment president Rob Reiner allegedly suggested that the focus of the film should be on the relationship between Will Hunting and his therapist, which of course ended up being the direction they went for. That's not where the story ends though. After getting the script ironed out, there were still disputes as to who would be casted. Naturally, Damon and Affleck proposed that they act in the lead roles, but Castle Rock Entertainment disagreed. They gave Affleck and Damon 30 days to find another buyer for the script. Otherwise, they would put the film in production, and Damon and Affleck would be out. Fortunately, they found Miramax Films just in time, who were happy to buy the script and cast both Damon and Affleck. They also allowed the two the freedom to choose the director, with Gus Van Sant eventually landing the job. This film was truly a passion project, and while it's true that others had a hand in the writing process, not just Damon and Affleck, it was their persistence that led to the film's production, and at the very least, they deserve credit for that. Since the movie's release, it has been widely regarded as a truly exceptional film. It's affected audiences everywhere with its dramatic and deeply emotional story. Many look at it as both Matt Damon and Robin Williams' greatest film in their stellar filmographies, which speaks volumes to the performances here. Has this universal admiration been earned, or has the film's greatness been exaggerated? Let's take a look. The opening scene is unassuming upon first viewing. Ben Affleck's character, Chucky, is picking up our protagonist, Will Hunting, played by Matt Damon. We don't linger on this moment long. In fact, it passes by so fast that it can be a little jarring when we suddenly transition into a classroom at MIT. The professor, Gerald Lambeau, explains that he's put a theorem on the chalkboard in the hallway, which he hopes one of his students may be able to solve by the end of the semester. Now naturally, we as an audience may assume that our protagonist is somewhere in this class, but curiously, there haven't been any reaction shots to suggest he's present. Just after the scene wraps up though, it's revealed that Will is only a janitor at MIT, not a student. One night, when he's alone cleaning the halls though, he solves the theorem. Despite how intelligent he is, he spends his time drinking with his friends, going to batting cages, and getting in fights. In response to the theorem being solved by a mysterious person, Lambeau puts a second, more difficult problem on the board. This time though, Will is caught in the act, but gets away before he's confronted by Lambeau. Later on, Will and his friends stop by a Harvard bar, where Will meets a girl named Skylar, who ends up giving him her number. Now, what I've summarized is essentially the first 20 minutes of the film. While the pacing has seemed extremely snappy so far, in reality, not much has happened to advance the plot. And I don't mean this as a critique. In fact, I think the opening section is perfect. It introduces and immerses us into Will Hunting's world, where nothing happens and nothing changes. And it all feels extremely candid for two big reasons. Firstly, the dialogue is snappy and witty. The way Will talks with his friends is realistic, and the way they joke with each other is relatable. And secondly, the cinematography makes us feel like we're a part of the world, especially when Will is with his friends. We often travel with Will, and the visuals are raw, for lack of a better term. The camera shakes, and it feels like we capture these characters as they are, imperfections and all. We see both their highs and lows. Speaking of lows, after Will's most recent fight, he's facing time in prison. Finally, Gerald Lambeau tracks him down though, and makes a deal with the judge. The judge will release him under two conditions. He has to meet with Professor Lambeau to work on math and stuff once a week, and second, he needs to see a therapist. Will initially scares off several therapists, until finally Professor Lambeau contacts his old college roommate Sean McGuire, played by Robin Williams. And this is the definition of a perfect casting. Sean is crude, yet due to how quick-witted he is, the humor feels light. After speaking with Gerald, Sean agrees to at least meet with Will, since they both grew up in South Boston. And this meeting scene is one of the tightest, most well-executed scripts I've ever seen. You could tell me this was written by Aaron Sorkin and I'd believe you. And apparently it's one of the only scenes to survive verbatim from the original 40-page script Matt Damon wrote, which would explain how it's so well performed. Sean maintains control in this conversation by continuously asking questions and effortlessly following Will's train of thought from one topic to another, until finally Will stumbles across a painting Sean painted himself. It depicts a man in a small boat rowing in a storm. Will mercilessly picks the picture apart, interpreting it as Sean being that man in the boat, alone and lost in a storm. Sean disregards this and aims to get back on track, until Will mentions that this potential storm could have been due to Sean marrying the wrong woman. At this point, we as an audience know that Sean's wife passed away. Will, however, does not know this, and that happens. For one reason or another, though, Sean agrees to meet with Will again. Before Sean and Will's next session, however, we see Will finally go on a date with Skylar. While not relevant yet, this one decision will prove to be the catalyst for major changes in Will. For Sean and Will's next session, they leave the office and head out to the lake. And this monologue delivered by Sean is powerful. This was the moment during my initial viewing that made me realize why this film stuck with people the way it did. Sean gives a few examples, all proving the basic point that, while Will is intelligent, he's lacking in life experience. And he's lacking this life experience due to fear. Will is so afraid that he never opens himself up to new experiences. Notably, throughout this monologue thus far, the camera has been solely focused on Sean. However, as Sean transitions to talking about love, Will's head slowly comes into view. We see him react as Sean talks about love and loss. This topic interests him, but he still refuses to speak, which again is an action motivated by fear. Sean ends his monologue by putting the ball in Will's court, plainly stating, "Your move." He tells Will that he wants to learn about him, but he can't do that unless Will opens up, which he won't do because he's afraid. In effect, forcing Will to confront his fears before anything. This fear Will has is further proven in the following scene, in which he calls Skylar, only to not say a word and hang up. The next few sessions between Sean and Will are spent sitting in complete silence. If Sean talks first, it completely defeats the point of this entire exercise to have Will get over his fear. Eventually, Will does speak though, even if it is just to tell a joke. He eventually tells Sean about the date he went on with Skylar and verbalizes the fear that kept him from calling her back after the date. In his eyes, Skylar's perfect right now, and he's afraid that if they were to meet again, he'd realize that she's not. And Sean picks this fear apart beautifully. He tells a story about his wife's imperfections, and the two share a laugh about it. And again, the naturalness in both the dialogue and performances is noteworthy. I'm not sure if I've ever heard a more genuine laugh in any film. Sean's point in bringing up this story is this though. Will isn't perfect, and neither is Skylar. Knowing these imperfections and continuing to love one another is what makes it beautiful. The only way to find this true love though is to face the fear head on and give the relationship a chance. Will throws this logic back at Sean though when Sean says he won't get remarried. And this is how I interpreted this. The film isn't pushing the idea that Sean should or shouldn't get remarried. The point of this line is that Sean has closed himself off in a lot of ways after his wife's passing. He stopped doing a lot of things he did previously. Through these therapy sessions though, he's also being helped move past his own trauma and finding some sort of joy in life once again. Hence his journey of self-discovery at the end of the film. Will finally musters up the courage to ask out Skylar again, and the two go on a second date. Skylar goes on to ask him if he has any siblings, to which he lies and says he has 12 older brothers. Later on, in his own words, he says he did this because he only wants to tell her what she wants to hear. And of course, this stems from fear as well. A fear that she'll be unimpressed or even scared by the truth. During Will and Sean's next session, Will asks Sean if he regrets meeting his wife, to which he responds that he doesn't regret a single day he spent with her. Will then asks Sean when he knew for sure that she was one for him. And this fascination with Sean's relationship clearly stems from Will's own budding romance with Skylar. Yet again though, this is an action motivated by fear. He's trying to find some sort of insurance before falling in love with Skylar. He wants to know for sure that he won't regret it. And yet again, Sean picks apart Will's fear with a story about his wife. And I absolutely love the editing in this scene, specifically the use of this overhead shot. The way it cuts from Sean telling the story to clips from the game and this overhead shot mirroring a baseball field is incredible. It adds life and energy to the story and fully envelops you in this moment, all for the reveal that Sean wasn't even at the game. He was having a drink with his future wife, and he doesn't regret it at all. While this still doesn't completely erase Will's fears, he does take a major step and introduces Skylar to his friends.
Are you awake?
No.
Yes, you
If you were to ask someone what their favorite scene in this film is, the most popular answer is probably the "it's not your fault" scene, which we'll discuss later. That is an entirely reasonable answer, of course, but for me, the scene where Skylar asks Will to come to California with her is my personal favorite. Throughout the entirety of the film's runtime, fear is constantly discussed and dissected, and this scene does this especially well. This might be a really stupid way of talking about this, but bear with me. Star Wars Episode 1 has an iconic line from Yoda. It goes like this: "Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." And this scene tracks that same philosophy. Will is clearly caught off guard when Skylar asks him to come to California. He starts using words like might and maybe while sharing this worst case scenario he came up with. His fear currently being expressed through overthinking. Then, out of this fear, Will lashes out. This leads to step 2, anger. In his anger, he immediately targets Skylar, more specifically her character. questioning her motives about both dating him and asking him to come to California. This is step 3, hate. Now, he clearly doesn't hate Skylar, and that's the point. One of the first things he says in this scene is,
"If you don't love me, you should just tell me because it's such a..."
none of these emotions are meant for Skylar. He doesn't hate her, he isn't angry with her, and he's not afraid of her. He's afraid of change, of course, but more than that, he's afraid of himself. Notice how he phrases his worst case scenario. He doesn't say, what if I find something about you I don't like? Or what if I want to go back to Boston? It's, what if you find something about me you don't like? And what if you don't want me there? If something goes wrong here, he automatically assumes it's going to be his fault. Since he's so afraid of himself, he gets angry. So angry, he grows to hate himself, and so he hides the truth from her. He can't see how she could possibly love him if she knew the truth. So he lied about having brothers, about being an orphan, and even lied about his stab wounds. He was so afraid of what she'd think that he automatically assumed she wouldn't want to know these things about him. And this all reaches a breaking point when she finally gives him an out. All he has to say is that he doesn't love her, and all this hate and anger and fear goes away. This worst case scenario that is a certainty in his head can be avoided. So what does he do?
I don't love you.
I don't know if this happened to anyone else, but when I first started driving, I had this issue where if I looked to the side, I would automatically start veering the car in that direction. I'm thankfully over that now, but why do I bring this up? Well, that's basically what overthinking is and what anxiety will do. We imagine these worst case scenarios and then gently guide ourselves into them subconsciously by mulling over them so much. Will would do anything to avoid Skylar no longer loving him. That would be bad because they'd no longer be together. So to avoid that, he'd rather lie to her and himself before she has a chance to stop loving him. And now they're no longer together, right in the situation he wanted to avoid. And that's what fear does. It allows you to be comfortably miserable.
Thanks.
Will finally goes to one of the meetings Professor Lambeau set up for him. They're offering him a job at the NSA. In response, he gives a monologue on a worst-case scenario if he were to accept the job. He recites this monologue to Sean, who of course has something to say about it. He points out to Will what both himself and the audience have been aware of. Will is never going to get anywhere if he's looking 10 miles ahead at every possible negative thing. And this fear has become blinding. Will is so afraid that when asked what he wants to do, he doesn't even have an answer. He clearly wants more for himself. He didn't become a janitor at MIT for fun, and he didn't solve those problems on the hallway chalkboard for no reason. He wants something, but he is too afraid to think of what that could even look like. And once again, this fear turns to anger, and anger into hate, which again gets him nowhere. This idea that he wants more for himself but is too afraid to go for it is proven by the fact that he took the time to call Skylar before she left. But when given an opportunity to invite her back into his life by simply telling her he loves her, he instead hangs up the phone. Chucky has been an unassuming character thus far. Every scene he's been in has been hilarious, but they've mostly served as segues between one plot point and the next. After he finds out that Will plans on doing construction the rest of his life, he finally has something to say though. He says that if Will's still doing construction in 20 years, he'll kill him. Will owes it to Chucky and all these guys who have no choice but to work construction to cash in this winning lottery ticket he has. The part of this speech that stuck with me the most was the part about how the best part of Chucky's day is for about 10 seconds when he goes to pick up Will and thinks that maybe he won't be there. Chucky values Will's well-being more than his friendship with him, and that's true loyalty, and it explains why Chucky and Will are such good friends. Chucky, for all his flaws, is consistent, reliable, and loyal. He always has Will's back, and as Sean puts it, would lay down in traffic for him. It's this rapport they have that finally makes this lesson hit home with Will. This is a realistic turning point and suits the characters beautifully. Will realizes that he needs to push past this fear, and the only way he's going to do it is with Sean's help. So he goes back to therapy. Will was an orphan. He was also abused by his foster father. Of course, this is trauma he's carried with him every single day of his life, and Sean dismantles it with one simple phrase.
It's not your fault.
This may seem obvious. He was a kid, and no child deserves that sort of treatment. Of course it wasn't his fault. But Will's been unknowingly carrying this thought with him all these years. He lives in constant fear and under a consistent routine because if he strays from that and things go wrong, it would be all his fault. But finally, he's confronted with the realization that all the things he's gone through were done to him. None of it was because of him. And when things go wrong, it doesn't solely fall on him. He doesn't have to constantly bear the weight of the entire world. And all he has to do to move past this is take that first step out of his comfort zone. He finally accepts one of the jobs the professor set him up with and says goodbye to Sean at their final session. And as mentioned before, Sean also has grown throughout these sessions. He's going to start traveling, putting his cards back on the table as he puts it. Due to Sean and Will's remarkably similar life experiences, they've helped one another through everything. And while Sean isn't the protagonist of this story, it feels equally as satisfying to see this kind-hearted man attempt to find joy in his life once again. This really is the definition of a feel-good film. It's inspiring in so many ways. If someone were to simply tell you, conquer your fears, find joy in the little things, accomplish your dreams, you'd probably laugh in their face for sharing platitudes that have little to no basis in reality. But seeing these lessons applied in a relatable, realistic setting serves as a guide on how these things can be accomplished. The film is a guide on facing your fears, finding real love, real human connections, and moving forward no matter what. It doesn't simply tell you to be a good, constantly improving person, it shows you how. It forces you to ask yourself the simple question, what do I want? And Will seems to have found the answer to that. He has good friends, a good paying job that can lead to potential fortune and fame, and mentors who would give anything for him. But is that really what he wants? Seemingly out of nowhere, he drops everything and goes to California to see Skylar. That is what he wants. The love Sean described, that feeling of looking in someone's eyes and being totally vulnerable. That human connection is what Will wants, and nothing is stopping him from getting it. And this is the definition of confronting your fears head on. He has no idea what's waiting for him in California. He doesn't know where Skylar is exactly, what she's doing, or perhaps she's already moved on. But still he's willing to confront a potential worst case scenario. And the nature of this ending puts us in Will's shoes. The film just ends on his drive to California, with the credits rolling as he makes the cross-country journey. It's easy as a spectator to sit down and criticize someone. When Will tells Skylar he doesn't love her, for example, we as an audience become frustrated. We knew he didn't mean that, and it's sad to see him throw everything away. Why would you ruin a good thing by overthinking it? But this ending forces you to confront the fact that you yourself are potentially the same way. Because if you overthink this ending, you'll lose the lesson, and the entire point of the film. This unresolved ending may have left you uneasy. What if his car breaks down? What if she's moved on? Then you may start to think about how much time has potentially passed since she's left, and how broken Will would be if she's moved on, which would completely undo all the progress he's made throughout the film. In effect, though, the film is doing exactly what Sean did to Will after their second session. Before doing anything, he immediately made Will confront his problem. And if you are anything like Will, you confronted this problem the second the credits began to roll. The film is telling you, the viewer, learn this lesson and apply it in your life, starting now. Obviously, this idea in itself may be overthinking the ending, but I found it interesting how well it reflects the main theme of the film. Good Will Hunting surprised me with just how good it was, and it's unfortunate I avoided it all these years. Aside from just being an incredibly well-made film, the lesson it imparts is genuinely powerful and is something everyone should try to apply in their own lives. Thanks for the suggestion. If there's another film you'd like me to cover, feel free to leave it in the comments. Thanks for watching.